Okay, 13th of August 2024. We'll see where this goes. As always. I'll talk to myself. It's odd. Put this in my vocal cords until people check in. Yes. What's the threshold? 5 minutes? Hi, I think someone dropped by there, so if you do log in, please let me know that you're there. This is going to be a strange live stream if I'm the only one, Nathan. It'll be odd talking to myself. I've got one person, so if you're there, please let me know. 6 minutes into the live stream, still nothing, so I don't know if you have Wi-Fi problems or something. Because the way I usually work with this is try to get a bit of interaction, say minimum of 3 people, otherwise it's not really worth it. Multitasking as often. The Razid W. Do you think that Tommy Robinson should be arrested for incitement? Welcome to the live stream, first of all. I think if there's evidence that he is inciting, then absolutely he should be arrested. From what I gather, he's not even in the country. He's somewhere in the Mediterranean, so I've heard. But yeah, absolutely, if he's inciting, he should be arrested. By incitement, I mean if he's specifically whipping up crowd, for example, to target mosques, etc. So, also, how are you doing, Nathan? Good to see you live again. Yeah, thank you. I'm okay. Today I felt a little bit lethargic, but unfortunately, I have a lot of things to do, so I've tried to be active, but I've just felt a little bit lethargic. I'm okay. I've been depressed by recent events, but personally, I'm okay. Not too bad. How about yourself? I'm pleased you've turned up because I honestly thought it was going to be an empty live stream for a while. Hope some more people turn up, though. It's good to get a bit of a flow going, debate or discussion, you know. You've been wearing a lot of GB shirts in your videos recently. Are you sure you're not in the right? That's funny, actually. I'll tell you a story about that. I was wearing, I think it was this one, actually. It might have been the London 2012 Olympics top. I went down to meet my friend for a coffee. This was a couple of days after the Sunderland riot. And I actually did think if something kicks off and I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time and the police see me wearing top with the Union Jack on it. Could I be caught up in it? And I'll be honest, I sort of preceded that because I'd overheard some women talking about something kicking off. And I thought, okay, I'll go and speak to the officers so they know I'm not on that side of things. Just to give them a heads up, they probably had the information anyway, but I did. I went and told them that I'd overheard that. So I've got 3 of these. There's this one, which I've noticed this is quite common. I've seen a few people wearing this specific branding from Primark. I have another one that's navy with the Union Jack on it, and I have the London 2012 top. I don't know why our flag seems to lend itself more than others to designs. I mean, even in other countries, you see the Union Jack all over the place. Not necessarily for a love of Britain, but I think just an affinity to the design. I mean, I do think it's one of the best flags in terms of just design. It also, I think, sends out a message that I've occasionally had kind of nationalist trolls accuse me of lacking patriotism. So here it is. I'm not ashamed to wear my national flag for healthy reasons, I would say. So Razid W, I'm just well, you know what? While we're waiting around, I'll ask you about your username. The Razid W. Does that have any meaning? Forgive me if I'm off base here, but it kind of sounds like the name of a character in Lord of the Rings or something. Wasn't it one of the dwarves with that name? Apologies if I'm off base with that one. I'm just curious. I thought it was about time I'd done a live stream. I've been back now for 2 weeks, and then I was abroad for 20 days. So it's been a while since I've done one of these. And I notice there's 3 people online now, so please do leave a comment. Let me know you're there. It could be a question, it can be a comment, it could be a criticism, it could be anything. It's just a question of participation. No meaning, haha, I hit my keyboard when I was like 11 after typing because YouTube wouldn't let me have any username, and well, I kept it. 11, that's an early start for YouTube. So just you can fix it though. It's not that difficult to change your username if you go into the settings. I mean, nothing wrong with it, but just as a matter of interest, if you ever wanted to do that, I think it is possible. Although I think they let you do it once, but not very often. Try not to break anything here, sort of multitasking, as you can see. So I've got 3 people online, so there must be someone else there. Please do leave a comment. How was your time in the Philippines? All too quick. It feels like I was there for 20 days and I filled it well, but it just seems like it went too fast. It was pretty good on the whole, except that I got a pretty nasty sunburn, and unfortunately that did cloud my experience a little bit because it was very uncomfortable. It's my own fault. I didn't put enough sun cream on and I was in the sea, which is not a good mix. Also, so health-wise, it could have been better, but in terms of the time, I filled it well. It's an interesting country. It's unique among Asian countries. It's not really comparable to anywhere else. So I would say it was a good experience overall. Some happy memories. I just wish my health had been a bit better when I was out there. It's a hell of a flight, or a journey, I should say. 3 flights: Newcastle to Dubai, Dubai to Singapore, Singapore to Manila. It's quite a hike. I think a total of about 17 hours flying time. So a lot further than China, which I've been to before. It's the longest journey I've ever done. Did you come across poverty or anything like that that opened your eyes a bit? Well, the Philippines is a poor country, so it's not so much that it opened my eyes. I was already familiar with it, but still, when you see it up close. It's quite shocking. A lot of stray dogs around the place, like absolutely everywhere, and you do get beggar children come up to you. Sometimes it's scams, so you need to be a little bit careful. But yeah, there's definitely poverty there. Having said that, I was in some shopping malls and they were super fancy, very clean, very modern. And the family I was with are quite well off by Filipino standards, pretty comfortable. They've got nice big vehicle and pretty big house. Not rich by any means, but comfortable, I would say, by Filipino standards. Cloudy McLeod, welcome. Hi Nathan, good job. You've got dishes to do. Well, just multitasking. They're almost done actually, so I'm going to wrap this up soon. But yeah, to answer your question, Razid W, there was definitely poverty there for sure. It is a poor country. I think it ranks about 127 in the world by GDP per capita out of 200 countries. So it would be classed as a lower middle income country, sort of on par with a country like, maybe thinking of Asia, if we're to compare the Philippines, similar to Vietnam. Maybe Vietnam might even be slightly above it. It's not poor the way some African countries are, but it's not a wealthy country. Actually, I was getting my beard shaved off. In the background of the barber shop, the president, that is President Marcos, was making a State of the Union address, and he spoke about aspirations to get into the higher middle income bracket. That would put the Philippines with countries like Mexico, Brazil, etc. But I think that's some way off yet. But 113 million people, it's quite a big country population wise. So I think it ranks about 12th in the world by population. They've got a very bad case of Catholicism. Well, it depends on your perspective. I mean, if you're a Catholic, you wouldn't think that. I'm not, but I come from a Christian background. They are very devout. I'm not going to lie. It's a very devout country. I'll say something though. Whilst I was there, they legalized divorce. Now that's a big thing for the Philippines. It's definitely. I mean, the religion is there, but it's not in your face. It's just always apparent somewhere. I mean, I went into coffee shops and there was little quotes from the Psalms and so on them. I won't deny it. It's a devout country, but it's not like, if you don't like that, it's not like they rub it in your face. So, but yeah, it's one of only two Asian countries that's majority Christian, the other being South Korea. Hence the overpopulation. Yeah, that's definitely a factor. Let's see. Have you ever had an awkward experience as a Northern Irishman with someone from Northern Ireland or the Republic of Ireland calling you Irish or stating the UK? Absolutely. I made a video a few years back about Northern Irish identity. It got a few thousand views. I was born in Northern Ireland. I'm proud of it. I was born in Belfast, but I have grown up in England. So, but my nationality is British, and I will always say that. Sometimes there's circumstances like I used to work in a charity shop, and someone would hear my accent and they compliment my nice Irish accent. Now, it's technically not accurate, but I'm not going to go out of my way to sort of, because it can look oversensitive if you sort of tap into that sort of stuff. What is annoying though is when I correct people and say, "Well, I'm actually from Northern Ireland," and they still say something like, "Oh, I had a friend in Dublin," and I'm thinking, "That's good. I've just told you I'm from Northern Ireland." So it can be a bit irritating, but I'm not going to complain about microaggressions or anything like that, because in the majority of cases, people mean well. I met a woman in that same charity shop gave a book to me while she left it, and she said to the nice young Scottish man. Hence the Scottish and Ulster thing often gets overlapped. I wasn't offended by it, but it was just interesting. But yeah, definitely, there's been times it's been irritating. I mean, I think I mentioned this, Team GB, the name of that irritates me. It should be Team UK. And they, the Olympic Committee made the point, well, we have athletes from the Channel Islands, but the Channel Islands are a crown dependency. They're not part of the UK. Northern Ireland is. So I don't really understand why they don't just go for Team UK. Because Team GB and Northern Ireland's a bit of a mouthful. So it grates on me a bit same with GB News, which I've just made a video about. GB is not a country. GB, people don't realize this, but Great Britain is just the island. It's our largest island. It's not a country. I was in Warsaw last week. It's mad how Catholic that place is and almost fully white. It's strange considering it's a European capital. Yeah, I understand Poland's one of the most devoutly, probably even more so than Spain or Italy these days. I think Lithuania is pretty Catholic as well. But I have heard that Poles are pretty devout in that sense. Probably you'd notice something similar in the Philippines. It obviously is not white, but it's the influence is definitely there. So what were you doing in Warsaw? Was that just a mini break, a holiday? Was it for a sporting event? Never been to Poland, I must say. I've been to quite a few European countries. I've never been to Poland yet. I don't know a great deal about Warsaw, except the World War II history, the Warsaw Uprising, and so on. And its architecture, it's got a lot of skyscrapers for a European city, I understand. I don't think England should be permitted to play internationally. Actually, should be a UK team. Are you talking about football, or there could be a case for that? I mean, among other things, it's just going to confuse the rest of the world because they're going to think, what's this country called? Is it Great Britain? Is it the United Kingdom? What is it? And it is confusing because it's, the Philippines' biggest island is Luzon. That would be like calling the Philippines Olympic Committee the Luzon team, which doesn't make sense. So, yeah. I don't follow football myself, but of course, England and Scotland have separate divisions. So, would you propose they're amalgamated? Because I would imagine, I don't follow football, but I'd imagine there would be a big shake-up then. And what you'd have to do is have playoffs between, I don't know, the top Scottish teams and the top English teams to see how it's re-ranked or something. And I can imagine there'd be controversy around that. But I appreciate your point. I think that for a sense of consistency. But I can also see there, let's see here. I disagree. The first international football matches were England versus Scotland. It's older than other national teams, hence why it's split. That's a good point. Football began on this island, and some of the oldest teams. I mean, I don't follow the sport, but I do know that some of the oldest teams are in England and Scotland. And England and Scotland are nations, both in the UK, which I'm a unionist. I support that, but they are nations, so I suppose. I mean, you've also got Wales and Northern Ireland, so or like calling Netherlands Holland. That's a good point. Yeah, and I know that annoys the Dutch to hear that. However, there should be a UK team in the Olympics. Absolutely, because Team GB, the point I make here is GB is not a country, it's an island. And I do think it snubs Northern Ireland. I mean, they've said, it's so that we can be inclusive of the Channel Islands. Fine, but the Channel Islands is not the UK, they're crown dependencies. So, I mean, the French team is inclusive of its overseas territory, so it would be the same principle. Let's see. England versus Scotland, you see, is decisive because of Scottish nationalism, etc. I guess it could. I guess the point W would make is it's very old. It goes well beyond. I mean, Scottish nationalism started getting traction in about the 1970s, and football in this island goes back to the 1860s. So I think it predates that. You have a point, though. I would say, though, even if the teams are amalgamated, there'd still be nationalism there. Football has always had nationalism, regardless of the setup. So I'm not sure it would necessarily get rid of that issue. And like I say, I'm not against it. I don't have strong views on this, guys, but I'm just thinking if you were to amalgamate the two teams, how would it work in terms of league system? I mean, this shows how ignorant I am about football, but like the Premier League and so on. Like, for example, would you have Rangers, if they're, just for the sake of argument, if they're top of the Scottish division, would they then surpass the top English team? I don't know what it is at the moment, but how would that work out? So that's the only thing I would mention. Northern Ireland, Northern Ireland's small, so there isn't really a major professional team there. But there's Linfield and Glentoran and Belfast, but they're much smaller than the mainland teams. So often in Northern Ireland, people go to Scotland. That's a big thing. Rangers or Celtic. There would be more Union Jackson show, more British unity. Yeah, like I say, look, I don't have strong views on this. I'm not against it. What would you do if the UK bombed the Philippines because you got That'd be very sad. It's my own fault, to be fair. I underestimate the power of nature. I.e., there's nothing worse than the sea, the open sea, and hot sun, and being a redhead. It's just a bad mix. I mean, I don't regret going in the sea because saw tropical fish. We went to a very interesting place, but yeah, I should have just what I should have done is put on more sun cream more sporadically rather than just once in the morning. Also, when I took a shower, I should have used like a shower gel rather than just put fresh water over me. Um, Honestly, I'm not sure I could have totally avoided it. What I probably could have done is just swam at night time. Because we stayed overnight on this particular beach. We had little beach huts. I should have just swam in the sea at night time, but I was so keen to get into the water that yeah, I should have just swam at night time. Levi, Beast Hunter, Summer, or Sunak? Well, if you're asking my opinion, I voted for my local Labour candidate, but Starmer, Sunak, honestly, I think both men have strengths and weaknesses. If I absolutely had to choose one, that's tough because I think Sunak's on the moderate side of the Tories, and I think Starmer is not Jeremy Corbyn. So I think they're both relatively moderate, actually. But I voted Labour in the election, so I guess that's the answer. But there's certainly plenty of critique to be made of Starmer, as there is with every Prime Minister. How about yourself, Levi? Did you see Starmer basically calling out Tommy Robinson in one of his addresses, saying people inciting this online and then running away themselves? It was hilarious. I didn't see that, but to be honest, I'm not a fan of Robinson. And if Starmer, I'd be surprised if Starmer named him by person because that would just give him more oxygen. I'm not a fan of Tommy Robinson. He has a track record of spreading disinformation, and I think he's kind of been turned into a Robin Hood type character that he doesn't deserve. So I mean, I'll be quite candid here. I've seen in my city there were Filipino nurses who were attacked, so I'm disgusted by what the far right has been doing in recent weeks, and I don't equivocate on that. I call them what they are. But yeah, I didn't see Starmer talk about Robinson directly, and I'd be surprised if he did. But I think it's right that Starmer's calling this out. I mean, people can argue about the underlying issues, and I think Labour would be arrogant to ignore those issues, but any government would be expected to take robust action. Remember in 2011, when the urban riots broke out, the Tory government took robust action as well. So there isn't really much. Robinson is a twat, this live stream, so I can say that. Yeah, I'd be tempted to agree. I mean, you know what it is with Tommy Robinson supporters? They latch on to the fact that he happens to have raised some important questions regarding grooming gangs and Islamism in this country, and he saw his hometown Luton have an Islamist problem. But being right about some things doesn't make him a leader, and it doesn't make him someone to look up to because more often than not, Robinson has absolutely incited trouble. So people need to see that the guy's not a leader. I think he's just, to be honest, I think he's a glorified football hooligan. That's how I see Tommy Robinson. I don't think he deserves the accolades that he gets as some sort of man of the people. I mean, he's certainly not the worst, but I mean, for goodness sake, he's a co-founder of the EDL. That says it all. Honestly, I feel like Farage is worse than Robinson. Quite possibly, because Farage is, I think, smarter than Robinson. He's elected. He arguably has more influence than Tommy Robinson. I'm not a fan of Farage for reasons I've stated before. I don't like his stance on Russia and Ukraine. And whilst I wouldn't say that Farage has incited these riots, I do think he is engaging in the same thing that a lot of people on the right have been doing, which is to normalize thugs and rioters and criminals as angry British citizens. Normal people don't go out and burn a stranger's car. Farage's response to this was that he condemned the rioting, but the 3-point plan to deal with immigration, fine, but how about the immediate problem of rioting? He didn't really address that. He just talks about reform being tough on crime. Well, he's got an opportunity to prove that. Now, Farage has said some stupid stuff for Russia, but you can't compare the two. There's a reason Farage distances himself from Robinson, but Robinson cries about. Well, that's what I'm saying. They are different. I wasn't comparing the two. If you go back a little bit, I was saying that Farage is smarter than Robinson, and I do think they're on a different. I don't think they're necessarily comparable, but I do think Farage is a populist. I think he's cynical in the sense that he exploits these things. This is gold for Farage because he can just say, "Oh, look how terrible Labour is. Labour doesn't care about the common man," and there may or may not be truth in that. But my issue with Farage is I don't think he's really a leader. He has made a career out of protesting, whether it be the EU or anything else. I don't know if Farage has ever personally made tough decisions. He's very good at stoking things up and saying, "This is what's wrong with the government," but his party aspires to be in government. And if that ever happened, then we'd have, probably by that point, it wouldn't be Farage, someone who succeeds him, but a prime minister, a home secretary, a foreign secretary, a chancellor, and then reform would find that they're actually having to make the tough decisions. And I think that real world politics is not as black and white as Farage makes it out to be. And he does. That's the problem with populists. They make things out to be simpler than they are. Main feeling I have about Robinson is he's not entirely in control of himself. Hothead rings true. Yeah, I mean, the people will point out to times he's been right about something, but he kind of shoots from the hip. Now, I'm not. I'll be honest here, guys. I can sometimes have a quick temper myself, so I'd be a hypocrite if I was too critical about that. The problem in the case of Robinson is he has got a history of violence and spreading false information, and when you combine those things, then I don't think he's someone to look up to. I think he's reckless. I certainly don't think he's the worst. I think there are really genuine neo-Nazis out there that probably make Robinson look moderate. But I certainly wouldn't trust Tommy Robinson or Stephen Yaxley Lennon, to give his real name. Did you see the images of protest riots in Northern Ireland with groups having both UK and Irish flags together doing it? That's an interesting thing that's happened in recent years, because there's been also anti-immigrant sentiment in the Republic of Ireland. There was actually very similar circumstances, the Dublin riot last year where the girl was stabbed and then that broke out. But I'll never understand the mentality of burning a police car, or even more so burning another citizen's vehicle. It's just mindless. Or the irony is, I think in the violence in Liverpool, they targeted a library that was catering for children. The irony of that, the very same people will claim they're doing it for children. Lunatics. Yeah, unfortunately, Northern Ireland has a problem with this. It's significant that there's been no trouble in Wales or Scotland, or none that I'm aware of. It's all been England and Northern Ireland. But it shouldn't be that surprising, because the English far right has long had sort of connections with Ulster Unionists. There's always been a bit of overlap there. I'm not saying it's necessarily organised, but I come from Northern Ireland, and I can say for sure there is definitely racist thugs in the province. It's embarrassing. I mean, of course there is everywhere, but Northern Ireland does have, I do think it has a particular racist problem. Having said that, there'll be a lot of decent people, of course, who reject that. And one thing about the demographics of Northern Ireland, it's went more to Sinn Féin, and they tend to be, it's went more to Irish nationalism. Except for, I was going to say that tends to be on the political left of things. They tend to be quite woke, quite green, etc. An interesting thing that's developed in Northern Ireland, they often comment on Northern Ireland politics, but the DUP and Sinn Féin today are not really the parties of the past. Both are more moderate than the past. I mean, Michelle O'Neill is kind of woke. She's not, even though her father was an IRA terrorist, I understand. It's, I think they're different parties today. I mean, Michelle O'Neill to meet the King, that was quite something. So Let's see here. Did you see the image? That's a question. Do you ever get bored or stressed from keeping up with all the politics? Also, what's your main career? That's a very good question, actually, because sometimes people will ask me to comment on this issue or this issue. It's simply impossible to get around everything. And yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I get fed up with it. Sometimes I need to just escape a little bit, whether that be listening to music or even dumbing down a bit, um, watching some cartoon online or some silly video. Just, I mean, I'm a political person. This channel's pretty political, but I think you can't do that 24 hours a day. It would be you need a life as well. So, although I've been in the channel talking a lot about the riots, I try not to. I've been doing other things, been getting on with other things. But it's a good question. I I do. I do get fed up with it sometimes. That's why I'm kind of pleased that Labour had a resounding victory because, in a way, whatever they get right and wrong, it settles the dust for a while. The same with Scottish nationalism. I mean, I honestly think Scottish nationalism had its peak. So, in a way, in Britain, notwithstanding what's been going on with the riots, our politics is sort of back to normal. You have the Labour Party is on the centre left, and you have the Conservatives are regrouping. I don't know which way they'll go, but in a way, yeah, I think. I mean, what I've noticed around the world, there's been some people have tried to exploit this situation. I've been looking at some of the Indian networks, and they've been gloating about it. The implication being that like the BBC, talks about problems in India. Oh, but look at the UK. The thing is, though, it's if you look at what's happening around the world, there are worse situations than the riots that we've had. Bangladesh, up to 300 people killed. Nigeria's had violent protests. So it's bad, but that's why I get really annoyed with someone like Elon Musk talking about civil war. It's hyperbole and it doesn't help anyone. We're absolutely not in a civil war. We're in there's serious social tensions out there, but civil war, it's absurd. If they remade Friends but made all the male characters black and female trans, would you watch it? No, absolutely not. They tried to do that with Four Weddings and a Funeral. Great British film. Don't know if you guys have seen it. Great romantic comedy. They tried to make this kind of woke American version, and it just didn't go down well. So no, I wouldn't watch it. I also think I've noticed there's big people criticizing Friends retrospectively for the lack of diversity. It's true that it was a white-led cast, but there were minorities in Friends. At one point, Ross dated Charlie, black girl. I would also, I know some of the people who are raising this critique. There was an actress, Bronson, she's called her surname. I don't know what she's from, but she's black. And, my response to her would be, um, you're entitled to your opinion about the show, but at least respect the fact millions of people think it was a great show. Also, Cosby Show, Fresh Prince of Bel Air, how diverse were they? I mean, just seems to be double standards in terms of what is expected. But I even heard Marta Kaufman, the producer of Friends, wanted to pay out an endowment to a black university or a black lobby group because she felt so guilty about the lack of diversity. It's up to her to do what she wants with her own money, but I think that's ridiculous. It's also worth noting that Joey Tribbiani, Italian American, historically that's been a persecuted group. Monica and Ross, Jewish. So could it have been more diverse, perhaps? But I think diversity for the sake of it gets into another plane of intentions. Sinn Féin are winning because the Union's vote is completely split on Brexit. That's interesting. Which side of the Northern Ireland divide do you come from then, if you want to say? Well, I'm a Protestant, but I'm not sectarian. I had Catholic friends, and my family. I'll say this: I'm proud to say that my father took part in the peace process. As a clergyman, he actually organised a peace rally in Belfast, or he was one of the organisers in 1993, which frankly meant meeting some unsavoury people. But I'm a Protestant, but I'm not. I certainly wouldn't go out and join an Orange March or something. Some of my extended family are a little bit more on that side of things, but um, you know, I've been to the Philippines, a Catholic country. So I've been to Rome. I've seen the Pope. So for me, I'm not a sectarian, but yeah, I do come from the Protestant side of things. And when I was born in 1985, Northern Ireland was a lot more Protestant than it is today. If George Galloway became the MP for Sunderland and he was ranting about your YouTube channel and said he'd want to box you, would you? No, because it would be unfair in an older man. I think Galloway's pushing 70 now. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't for that reason. Um, I'd have to go easy on him because he is an older man. Although I can't stand him, and I must admit, I wouldn't trust myself not to heckle him or something. Um, if he became MP for Sunderland, I'd be thoroughly depressed. But notice what happened in Rochdale. He swooped in there, he got the by-election victory, then he was kicked out a few months later, which proves it was a fluke. It was like a temporary protest by the people of Rochdale. Um, so it's easy to overstate someone like Galloway. Um, I mean, his party done pathetic in the election. He's a maverick. I can't stand the man. I think he's toxic, but at the same time, it's perhaps important not to overstate his influence. I mean, Galloway's got a lot less influence than Farage or even Tommy Robinson, probably. I think it's a few Islamists in the Northwest support George Galloway, and that's about it. Did you pick up any of the lingo in the Philippines, and are you interested in learning it? I did actually, and it's Tagalog is the language, Filipino. It's actually not that difficult. You know, I was in China. I do speak a little Chinese. Chinese is a lot harder because the intonations, the tones are a lot more important in Chinese. I'll give you a few examples. When you're paying for a jeepney ride, that is the vehicles that they use, sort of converted jeeps, and you need to pay the driver, it's bayad po. One thing you'll hear a lot in the Philippines is po, po. It's kind of not to be confused with Kung Fu Panda, but it's a term of respect for an older person, and it is probably the most common word they use. I mean, to family members, to older strangers, it's very, very common. A few other things I picked up. I actually had an unusual situation. I went to a funeral there because the family that I was staying with, the uncle in that family died of a heart attack. I went to his wake and I went to his funeral. And let me see if I can remember this now. Oh, I'm on the spot. It was something like Nikisa Akoi. I forgot the other two words, but it's basically sorry for your loss. And I thought it would be respectful to kind of say something like that in the local language to his widow, which I did, and his son. But there was other words, you know, the thing about Filipino Tagalog, it's not, there's words borrowed from Spanish, but it's not a very difficult language. It's quite easy to pick up actually. That's what I found. A lot easier than Chinese. Because with Chinese the tones are so important. Filipino not so much. Says quite a lot about Galloway that he thinks political differences can be legitimately be sorted out by punching someone in the face. I thought you guys were joking. Was he actually talking about settling? Did he? I thought the boxing thing was a joke. Was he actually talking about that? I mean, he's certainly, you know, Galloway's in his late 60s or might even be his early 70s. It's certainly no business being in a boxing ring. So what's he proposing? Money goes to Gaza, something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's even in a controlled situation like that, it's not good optics. Still violence ultimately. I mean, I'm a boxing fan, but should politicians be boxing? I'm not sure about that. But I didn't know that. Did he actually challenge someone to a boxing match? Galloway's a mouthpiece. He'd have to take his hat off, that famous fedora. His wife's Indonesian, or his partner, she's a lot younger than him, so I don't know. She obviously shares his ideology. She had her nails in the Palestinian colors, and I don't know how much influence she has in terms of the support base. And you know, generally, I say, oh, leave politicians' families out of it, but in her case, she was quite political. I noticed she was at all his rallies, and she was not making speeches, but you could tell her politics were the same as his. What kind of music am I into? So let me just take a drink. I would say I try to be very eclectic. I like classical music, but not all classical music. Some of the conventional stuff can be a little bit dull. I like um, I like film scores. I'm a big fan of film scores. You know, John Williams, James Horner, geniuses. Um, I like film scores. I like chill out music. I'll give you an example just to give you an idea. I like some traditional artists, like pop artists. I like Elvis, Billy Joel, Johnny Cash. Well, honestly, I wouldn't pinpoint my tastes as like as one specific thing. Amongst contemporary music, I like trance actually. I mean, I really am eclectic. I range from trance to classical music, which is very different. This is the sort of thing I like chill out sort of music, kind of mix CDs. I do appreciate that stuff. I'll be reading a newspaper, and this is what I'll play. I used to like the record label Head Candy because I liked the Winter Collection, but I didn't. Not all of their stuff. In fact, I could show you. Let's see here. This is Head Candy. My phone's just fallen on the ground and broken, so I'll have to sort that out. It's kind of chill out pop music. Some of it's better than others. They're famous for their sexy ladies on the design. The only music I do not like is the sort of rap that we get nowadays. Some rap I'm okay with, but I cannot stomach like drill and stuff like that. I think it's toxic. Um, but yeah, that's when it comes to music taste. That's excuse me. I have dropped my phone and the thing's falling apart, so I better fix this. I'm not too worried. It's a cheap phone, but be 1 second. Cheap little phone. Let's see. Sorry, guys. Let's see. He's always ranting about challenging his opponents at actual boxing matches, fancies himself as a bruiser. I think he is an egomaniac. There was one video of Galloway where it said like greatest parliamentary maiden speech, and I assumed it was from one of his supporters, but it was his own channel. He'd actually posted it himself. So he's got a bit of an ego, George Galloway. I also noticed in the Rochdale count, not during the general election, but during the by-election, he was late. He just turned up late with his little entourage and his little hat, and it just looked arrogant, like he was doing that just to kind of make a point or something. All the other candidates were waiting, and Galloway's late. But I can imagine when he was younger, Galloway wasn't above getting into a bit of a scrap. He sort of has that John Prescott thing about him, but he's not a young man, and he's approaching 70 now, so he's got no business in a boxing ring, even if it was for charity. What do you think about AI in the sense of Chat GPT and Bing Copilot? I must be honest, I really don't know enough about Chat GPT, and I've never heard of Bing Copilot to comment about them. But more broadly, I do think we need to be wary of AI. I'm not going to say it's an entirely bad thing, but you know, what's concerning is how convincing it can be and how can masquerade reality. Some of it's very creative. I mean, I've seen all those videos where it says your month, your AI, that sort of thing. I don't know if you guys have seen that. So it could be creative, but I would definitely be wary of its influence. Um, it's like the new age stuff. I think that's replying to the last comment. Saying this, I've heard they are starting to remove parts of him from the archive. Um, let's see. The archive, are you talking about the parliamentary archive? I would actually be fine with his speeches being kept up just for the record, but I'm so pleased that Galloway lost his seat. Just proves, yeah, thank you. I think it is okay, but I need to kind of fix it up. This has happened before. I'll just have to sort of start up again. It's honestly, it's a cheap phone, but I've had it for years. Yeah, it's okay. It's starting up again. By the way, also, you didn't talk about your main. Oh, excuse me, my main career. I'll be honest. I don't work a 9 to 5 job. I work very part time at the moment. I'm not unemployed, but I'm a tutor. Basically, that's my background. I teach English online to Chinese students. Spoken English, sometimes grammar. We cover various things, and they range in age from children to young adults. So it's that's my job basically, but it's far from ideal. I need a much better paid job, and it isn't easy. I've trained in journalism, but getting a breakthrough as a freelancer is very difficult. So that's the answer to the question. Basically, my background is education. I was a teacher in China. That's my background, but it's very, very part time at the moment. I was referring to Hugh Edwards with the oh, excuse me, because I didn't see Edwards mentioned previously. So oh, it's like me. I'm a Rangers fan, but my missus is a tick. Let's see here. Hugh Edwards. Anyway, yeah. The problem with Hugh Edwards, is because he was an anchor man, he did cover some historic events, and I think it would be wrong to remove him reading the Queen's death because of this scandal that's emerged, because that would be depriving people of a historic archive, and the BBC is not going to do that. But what I think they are removing is some other things, like his appearances, I guess, on other shows and so on, and that's makes sense because it would look like they're celebrating a predator. Um, Definitely, I think he should be forced to pay back the money that he took when he knew what he'd done wrong. You know, license fee payers' money. Really, it's. I think the BBC has to handle this well because there's a history of scandal in this regard. We know about Jimmy Savile. We know about the fallout from that. So, I mean, I must admit, I was genuinely shocked by the whole Hugh Edwards thing because it was such a facade. He was so professional. He was the immaculate anchor man, probably one of the most trusted people in the country. And then this happens. It's a very sad thing. But yeah, I don't think they can remove all the archives. I mean, that one of him reading the Queen's death, it's probably one of the most viewed BBC News reports ever. So I don't think they can remove that. And I don't think they should either, because it is historic. I mean, it's the subject rather than the reader that is what's important. Um, I wouldn't say YouTube's my career, although I do spend a lot of time in this. Sometimes I sell on eBay. I wouldn't go so far as to say that's a career, but it's a business exchange. I sell something, I get paid for it, so it's sort of a job, I guess. But it's not regular enough to say that that's a job. And sometimes I don't see any profit. I sell historic newspapers, and because I know how it works, I put a relatively low market price on it. I mean, more than what I paid for, but still relatively low. And I pay for the postage. And because eBay takes away some of the selling fees, I end up barely making a profit. I mean, this week I sold two newspapers and I made 50 pence, even though I got paid £4. The reason being I had to pay for the postage. I give my buyers free postage. So, because it's more likely to sell that way. Let's see, what would you say the punishment should be for him? Well, if he's been proven to have engaged in criminal activity, i.e., preying on vulnerable young people, it's a criminal offence. He should go to prison. It's this is not small stuff. And the thing about looking at that material online, some people would say it's just images, but it's fueling that vile trade. It's enabling pedophiles because it's what they're doing online. They need an audience, so definitely he should be punished in that sense. Same as anyone else. I don't know what the legal consequences are for it, but he shouldn't be. I reckon because he's a high-profile character, he'd probably have to be in solitary confinement in prison because he'd be targeted. Which, I don't support anarchy in prison, but what he's done is disgraceful. So definitely, I think any BBC pay he should be legally obliged to pay it back, because it's the sort of thing that angers people about the BBC. Like, why is it someone could be threatened with arrest for not paying the license fee, but you have a prolific predator at the top? It's, considering he's pled guilty, yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know what actually the legal consequences are for looking at material, but then again, it wasn't just looking. He actually, as I understand it, solicited with young people. he knew the guy that he was in exchange with was a paedophile. So, and Hugh Edwards is an intelligent man, so he can't plead ignorance about this. It's disgraceful. For any image shows abuse, exactly. He should be made an example of, really, considering how it's clear he uses power. I mean, I think he should absolutely go to prison, because it would happen to anyone else. Any other predator would go to prison. So definitely, I agree. Okay, guys, I'm going to actually wrap this up soon, because I recorded the Paris Olympics closing ceremony and I haven't watched it yet. So I better get around to that. It's like 4 hours long or something ridiculous. I won't get it all watched tonight, but I'll try and start anyway. So it's been a decent live stream. Thank you all for your participation. That's how these things work, because without participation, it's pointless. In a way, I actually prefer live streams to engaging in online comments, simply because it's more direct. It's more, I can't get back to every comment, and there's more ground for misunderstanding. So I think I enjoy doing this, broadly speaking. Just looking his classes making images. Yeah, and it wasn't just a few of them either. I understand he downloaded thousands of images. I mean, that's at some point his psyche must have told him this is wrong. Whatever his excuse is. Apparently, I read something in the Times about another journalist who knew Edwards, and he said that he had this incredible ability to kind of switch into professional mode. So he drank a lot during lunch breaks, and he'd have this sort of lifestyle where it was kind of extremes. He'd drink a lot, he'd indulge himself, then immediately say, "Oh, it's news at 10," and get into professional mode. And there's no denying he was a good newsreader. He was, if you ask a I was going to say child, that's no pun intended. But if you ask someone to draw an idealistic anchorman, it would be Hugh Edwards. So it's just so shocking that this has transpired. I will say this, all those celebrities who were lining up to defend Edwards, people like Owen Jones and others, they should apologise to the victims for going out of their way to defend Edwards. We all make mistakes, but they shouldn't have been so quick to judgment. I mean, we say quick to judgment, that can work either way. It can also be being too quick to defend someone. Better get training for the boxing match versus Galloway. He would knock back bottles of wine and champagne mostly. Yeah, that's what I read in the Times. He seemed, I don't know if he had an alcohol problem, but he certainly seemed to drink a lot. But then he just switched into professional mode. I mean, that's something that it takes a good bit of skill to actually do that, to keep it on top. And not to divert, but Matthew Perry, the actor who played Chandler, he seemed to somehow, for years on Friends, no one would have imagined he was having alcohol problems, but he obviously was. I think it was only Jennifer Aniston noticed something was wrong. Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. Yeah, that's right. I think you might have read the same report, Cloudy. That's what it said in the report. That he was very blunt also with colleagues about his opinions of colleagues, to the point of being a bit reckless or arrogant, depending how you look at it. I'm going to wrap this up, guys. Thanks a lot for coming along. I don't know when I'll next do this. It's very sporadic, but it's been a good live stream. So thank you and take care. I'm going to wrap this up. Good evening. Good night, I should say.